Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, my guests are paranormal investigators Pam Nance and Ashley Field. Pam and Ashley are the founders of Spirit Hunters of the South and have investigated over 70 historic sites in the Mid-Atlantic and southern United States. Over time, the team has aligned their research in paranormal investigative techniques with methodologies and theories from the field of archaeology, anthropology, history, and quantum physics. I know you'll find the conversation fascinating as we discuss Pam's near-death experience, growing up with paranormal experiences, how quantum physics comes into play, the team's methodology, and most importantly, their results. During the discussion, we will talk about the extraordinary EVPs or electronic voice phenomenon that Pam and Ashley have captured during their investigations. Several of the recordings are included at the end of the interview so the audience can hear for themselves. And to kick the show off, I asked Pam and Ashley how they got started in the field of paranormal research. And here is what they had to say.
Well, I became interested in the paranormal field after having a couple of fairly frightening experiences as a child of the age 10 and 11. They were sort of situations that my parents couldn't explain. They told me I was dreaming, but I know that it was not a dream. And so I never forgot those two experiences, and I've continued to have unique experiences as a teenager with an out-of-body experience, and then in my 20s as a near-death experience, and then sort of experiential encounters of paranormal type in the home that I currently live in. And so it's just kind of been a part of my life since I can remember. And my mom told us ghost stories when I was a little child, and it's just been a very natural part of my life that doesn't frighten me. It just intrigues me and makes me want to learn more about what it is we're actually dealing with.
And you had an NDE, Pam?
I did. I had a duodenal ulcer in my late 20s, and I was a couple of weeks from graduating and working double shifts at the restaurant where I was working at the time to get through college, and just totally stressed out, and this vessel burst in my stomach and I bled for a couple of days and had no idea. So I basically bled out and died and went to the other side, and my husband, thank goodness, performed some CPR and called 911, and they were able to get me back and transfused me. But I just went off to a beautiful green valley, and it's indescribable. The accounts that you hear, truly, that's how it is. You cannot describe the color, just the feelings that you get there. It was quite amazing. I did not want to come back. I didn't encounter any deceased loved ones. There were only animals there for me. And we had a 14-year-old Rottweiler that died 2 days before my experience. And she was actually there. And she was young and happy and wagging her tail. And I could feel her head under my hands as I petted her. And it was very real. I have no doubt that I went to that place. And, coming back here after that, it just everything seemed so plain and
Anticlimactic.
yeah, exactly. Although at the same time, I have to say it raised my awareness to the point that as I came from the car, after leaving the hospital, came from the car and walked into the house, I was stopping at all the plants in amazement because it was almost like I could see the energy coming from the plants in the yard and them breathing, like this awareness of nature that I'd never had before. But then life in itself just seemed kind of mundane for a little while after that. But I was able to hang on to that feeling that I had on the other side for maybe 6 months or a year afterwards, and then it slowly kind of went away. And people ask me afterwards, did you go through a tunnel? And I really didn't. I was just there in this beautiful, beautiful green valley. And it was maybe a year later, I was home from work and I was watching Oprah, and it was a show on near-death experiences. And most of the people had the common experience of going through the tunnel and seeing the loved ones. But one woman described the exact same experience that I had of being in this valley with a huge tree and snow-capped mountains and animals. And so I think she and I went to the same place. I don't know what that means, that we only encountered animals. But that I really liked that. That validated, my experience. I felt that it was more than just a hallucination or a dream.
Yeah, no, it's not a hallucination. It's a beautiful story. And you know that I do the regression work, spiritual regression, and the story that you're telling, that gets replicated in the regression work. When you take a client back, sometimes they're met by loved ones or other beings, divine beings, and other times they don't. Other times they wind up exactly where you wound up, in a beautiful place. And it's very serene, it's very tranquil. You might be there by yourself or with animals, whatever it may be, but that's an amazing story. Good for you. I don't mean good that you had an NDE, but I mean.
I'm actually glad that I did.
So, Ashley, how did you get started?
We moved into a historic home when I was 7 years old, and it was very active. And I kind of grew up in that environment of a lot of paranormal activity. Every night when I would go to sleep, you would hear someone walking around my bed. The lights would come on, doors would open, doors would shut, things would go missing, things would come back. I mean, that was our house, and that's what I grew up in. And was very fortunate. My parents were very open-minded, and I wanted to know what I was dealing with. And I've always been an avid reader. I guess I was really a geek when I was young. I still am, but I was fortunate. I started reading, I can remember reading Chariot of the Gods when my friends were reading about Babar. I can remember reading about reincarnation and when they first started documenting those things in hypnosis, and just adamant about anything I could get my hands on. And I've always been that way. And I grew up in the environment. And as soon as I met Pam, it was ironic because she was into the same thing. So it was kind of like kindred spirits. And I've just been fortunate. I've been surrounded by people that are very accepting and very knowledgeable and very open-minded to this. So
I remember being about 10 or 11 years old, and I'm going to say for months, when I say months, I mean 4 to 5 months, a few times a week, I would be in bed at night and I would see apparitions. Clear as day. Clear as day. Of course, as a kid, you're not saying a whole lot. I didn't tell my parents. I just thought it was, I don't know what I was thinking. I was a kid, maybe I was thinking that I was kind of imagining it. And I remember that they came in, it was like a procession, and they looked like they were dressed in maybe garb from the 1700s. And the men they had beards, and the women were dressed in these long dresses, and they had the bonnets. And some of the women were holding their children by the hands. This scene would repeat over and over again. It was like a loop. And as I was lying there as a kid in the bed, they would walk past me, and then they would look down at me. It was clear to me that when they looked down that they saw me, but that was basically it. There was nothing beyond that. And then they would just dissipate. They would walk into the wall, and they would just disappear. And that went on, like I said, for months.
Where was this experience at, if you don't mind me asking?
I was born and raised on Long Island, so it was on Long Island in New York. Like I said, it was unbelievable. It was an unbelievable experience. And there were other experiences that I had in my life, poltergeisty types of stuff, but that one in particular really solidified it for me because I've never forgotten it. To this day, I can tell you exactly what they look like. Just an amazing experience. Our society and our culture wants to teach us that life and existence is in this little box. It's defined a certain way. And they don't want you to explore beyond that box, because beyond that box, it gets very interesting.
And challenging to a lot of people's beliefs.
Exactly. Exactly right. So anyway, enough about my experiences. And that's why I wanted to have you guys on, because I just find this whole area just to be so fascinating. And because I know Pam, I know that I'm dealing with people that are truthful and doing this work. I mean, really doing this work. I'm very excited to be talking to both of you. Now, any of the experiences that you've had or any of the work that you've been doing with your work, have any of those experiences been not friendly? In other words, you've encountered spirits or entities which were not welcoming?
We've encountered it, but we've never, when we did Moon River Brewing, we recorded a lot of these, what I call the ode to poltergeist get outs. But there was no harm. Just someone that didn't want us there. We did encounter kind of some hostility at the Old City Jail in Charleston.
Do you want to elaborate, Ashley?
It was just Pam and I, because only Pam and I investigate together. It just never works if we try to do guest or anything. We just do better with just two people. So we were in the morgue. It was about 2:30 in the morning, and the morgue in the Old City Jail, the way it's done, it's kind of a long room, and at the very end there's a ramp. It's the body ramp, and the original wood door is still in place at that ramp. And that's where they rolled the bodies out. So I'm standing right in the pathway of the door, and I'm looking at the door. Pam's standing off to the side, probably 4 or 5 feet to my left. And we had heard some things in the corner, and we thought maybe it was mice, because there's a gap under the door to the outside. And we were like, oh, probably some mice, We were kind of tired, and we were investigating, and we really didn't think we were getting anything, which happens a lot. And that never is what happens. We always end up with a ton of stuff. And I remember I was standing there and I was staring off, and I said, oh, I'm not even going to repeat what I said. And Pam's like, what? And you could hear the footsteps, because the floor is really gritty in the jail, and you could hear the footsteps coming at me. And the next thing I remember, I landed on Pam, and she fell against a file cabinet, which is the only thing that kept us from hitting the floor. And I really don't recall the point between hearing the footsteps, and it was like somebody was running right at you, but you can't see anything, but you can hear it, and then I'm slammed into Pam. That's probably the only thing, but a lot of that was when we first started investigating. We kind of tried to do some triggering to get some reactions, so we kind of did like, okay, the jailer thing, and, okay, we're here, you guys listen up, and no. Definitely found out that is not the methods to use at all.
So it's not best to antagonize?
Oh, no. You're going to get whatever you put out.
Because you see that on some of the shows, right, where they try to bring the spirits or the entities out by being antagonizing. And I always thought, well, that's probably not the best approach.
No. Ashley had actually done a little bit of role playing earlier in the evening as one of the prison guards. Not so much antagonizing, but acting like she was a guard and sort of raking the bars with a flashlight, like maybe they would have done. And so we think maybe whatever ended up attacking her in the morgue was a result of that earlier role-playing incident. But after we, got back and we reviewed the evidence, it was clear that they were attacking us because we had an EVP of a man saying, that shook them, and another saying, keep attacking them, and a woman said, F them.
Mm.
And we know that Lavinia Fisher was held in the Old City Jail. She was the only white woman ever held there, and this was a Caucasian woman's voice. So we're thinking it was Lavinia and her crew maybe didn't appreciate us being in their area that time of the morning, but at any rate, Ashley took one for the team.
Well, let me ask this question. I've always wondered this, and I don't know if you guys have asked these questions to the spirits. Are they aware that they are dead, or are they living in another dimension and they look at our involvement or our interacting as invading their space? What are your thoughts on that?
That's you, Pam.
We have some pretty strong thoughts in that area. We're really like formulating our theories, and we've done a lot of research into quantum physics, and we're actually collaborating with some physicists and bouncing ideas off. But we do think that they're multidimensional beings that possibly aren't dead. So now we're actually stepping away from the entire idea that they're a ghost.
Mm-hmm.
These are trapped dead people.
Yeah, in fact, when we do our public speaking, we usually start off by saying we don't believe in ghosts.
Okay. So you're down the path now that you believe what's happening is there's an overlapping layer of dimensions. Is that where you're going with this? Where we,
Much, maybe not really overlapping, but parallel, and sort of the multiverse
yeah,
model where their quantum timelines stacked or laid against each other,
okay.
and
And what, we're sharing the same space, or you're sharing the same space when you arrive?
I don't know. That's still trying. Quantum theory is very hard to wrap your head around, and
I
even
know.
some of the theorists don't fully understand it. They have a difficult time verbalizing and explaining it, but somehow, yes, we're either overlapping or we're bumping up to these other dimensions. But we have questions about why is it that we have to use all of this equipment to communicate with them, but they seem to be able to easily communicate with us and see us.
In other words, why can they come through so easily, but we have to use equipment? So how are they communicating with us, and what are they using? And it's interesting that this comes up because we're actually setting up to do a huge experiment in January, February of next year with a guy who was a audio major from Clemson. And he's got ideas. And he's going to do his experimentation as we investigate and see what we can pull together to figure out how this communication is taking place. He has picked apart one of our pieces of equipment, which is a spirit box, which generates white noise by scanning radio frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, it's not radio frequency noise. It's not radio noise you're recording. He's like, I've pulled it apart. So we're on to something. It's just a matter of what are we on to?
Okay.
How is this happening?
Yeah, it's really amazing because one of the questions I had, or one of the questions I would have if I were doing this type of work, would be to ask, are you trapped? Do you realize, or do you know that you're dead? And, I'm thinking to myself, they might turn around and say, what do you mean? I'm not dead. I'm existing. I'm here. It really gets to be very, very complicated. And it's mind-boggling, right, when you think about it.
Well, actually, what they're telling us is that we're dead, because we ask them, what do we look like to you? And they tell us, dead, you're ghost.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Really? Okay.
So here you go, and here's a really good physics question for you. In order to validate your existence, two people need to acknowledge your existence. Okay, so here are Pam and I, we see you, we talk to you, so that means that you exist, you're alive. Or does it? What state are you in? Are you dead? Are we dead? Are we all dead?
Yeah, it's like The Sixth Sense. Remember The Sixth Sense, the movie?
Yeah.
I feel so stupid. I was one of those people that I didn't get it till the end.
Neither did I. I didn't get it until the wedding ring fell off across the floor. I'm like, oh, okay. Duh.
But we've discussed the fact that the thought of people being trapped here after you die, first off, it would be extremely crowded. And second off, how depressing could that be? That just can't be right. There's so much about our universe, that just can't be it. There's got to be more. These people that have the near-death experiences are experiencing something totally different besides being trapped on Earth.
Right.
You have to ask yourself what you're really dealing with.
Yeah, no, like I said, it's mind-boggling. It really is when you really start to dig into it. And you guys are doing unbelievable work. Let me ask this question then. So this is going to lead into the methodology. And I did read through your charts, but I was wondering if you can, because I'm not going to do it justice, if you can explain to me your methodology, because you have a very disciplined process. And I think it'd be very interesting to the audience to hear.
I'll give you the best synopsis, and then I'm going to let Pam detail it, because
Okay.
it's really written on a lot of her knowledge that she learned when she was studying archaeology. If you could have lunch or dinner with any person in history, what would you ask them? That's our methodology. And then I'll let Pam elaborate on how that works.
I thought you were going to ask me that question. I was, I'm going to get stumped.
So basically what we've done, we've taken some of the methodologies from archaeology, like establishing our timeline of occupancy. So we identify a site, and just to let the audience know, we don't choose sites based on any reported paranormal activity. We choose sites based on their historic significance, and we do not investigate any private residences, only historic type of sites. So First, we ID those sites. Then we develop our timeline of occupancy. We take the site back to the earliest possible point that we can find through research. And oftentimes that takes us all the way back to the 1600s. And we work our way up, usually through the 1800s, identifying all the occupants at the site. And from the timeline and our players that we identify, we then set up what's called an ethnographic profile. And those are just things that would resonate with those beings at these different levels, like, politics, religion, the types of foods that they ate, wars, daily activities, the games the children played. So we established this ethnographic profile, and that's our platform for communication. We bounce off of that and ask questions and really dig down into their daily life. And we know all of the players at the point that we go in to investigate. And this is where Ashley comes in. She is such a great historic researcher, and she's got legal background, so she can speak to this, but it's just phenomenal, the information that she can find about these family members. And Ashley, if you want to say a little bit about what you do.
So where do you go for that, Ashley? I was going to ask, so when you do the background, do you go to local libraries? Is it online? How do you do that?
The majority of the things I have found, fortunately, are online. Some of it I'm building a actual physical library of books as well, because a lot of times while I'm doing the research on the internet, I've also ordered books that I've found that pertain to the subject, the families, whatever it may be, and I'm cross-referencing into that. The basic start is a title search. Title search the land. Start out, figure out who owned it, who really established an occupancy on that land, and begin there. And then you start looking at the families that live there. And you want to research the families, and you want to do more than Ancestry.com is a great site, but there's a lot of information that's incorrect on it. You really have to do a lot of cross-referencing across the internet, look up these families, find out things, and you'd be surprised some of the things we found out about people. And you also use things that happen in the area, like wars that may have affected sickness. Savannah's been wiped out, I think, twice by yellow fever. These are things that would have impacted the occupancy of the property we're investigating. And you just branch out from there, and you turn over every stone, and you go, instead of going straight on most times, you have to come around and go a whole different way to find stuff. Usually we start out with about a 20-page document before we ever investigate of our history that we comprise together.
That's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess then there's the equipment, right? I don't know. Do you want to talk about the equipment, or is this something that you prefer to keep proprietary?
We use simple equipment.
Okay, there you go.
Simple out-of-the-box video camera, like regular digital cameras, out-of-the-box video recorders. I've got a video camera that shoots in infrared that I bought through Best Buy. Pam's got a video camera that shoots in night vision. About the only specialized equipment we have is we have an EMF detector that's really nice. It's digital. And we use a spirit box, which is the scanning frequency that I told you about, where it's like radio and it scans the frequencies and it creates a white noise. And it scans at, what was it we decided? It was 1/16th.
No, I think 1/1000th of a second.
Yeah, 1/1000th of a second scan rate. So it's so fast.
What does it do exactly? What is it? What's its purpose?
Well, it creates a white noise, which creates a platform for communication. And that's a question we have. I'm glad you said that, because we want to know why they need this platform to communicate. Because they can obviously hear us perfectly fine, but we can't hear them. We have to use a device. And you either are recording them straight out on audio without this device, which works great. We've got a lot of evidence that way. Or you can use this device and you can hear the communication in real time, and we can create a dialogue a lot of times. So
Okay.
They'll make a comment, we can ask a question on that comment and build this conversation. And we have stuff recorded like that.
So when you use the white box, Ashley, do you hear them real time, or do you have to go back to your recordings?
Real time.
Wow. Okay. I was wondering that because you had sent me the EVPs, and I noticed that on some of the EVPs, you would ask a question, they would respond, you would ask a follow-up question. And I was thinking to myself, well, how did they know to ask that follow-up question? And you just answered that because you're hearing them real time.
Yeah. And what's really interesting is they love that we know so much about them. And we find they get really excited when we walk into a location. They start shouting, the people, the people, the people, like they know, here they are again. And that's also something that's kind of confounding for us, is that they know us. We used to introduce ourselves early on when we'd go into a site. We don't do that now, and they know who we are. And we have entities that seem to show up at locations hundreds of miles apart. It's almost like, I don't know if they follow us but there's a woman named Beth, a man named Edward that regularly show up. That just opens other questions for us.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it begs the question. The question I have is, do they have an existence where they are? In other words, are they just hanging around? Are they just in some place or space where interaction is limited? Or it goes back to what I was saying before. Is it some place where they're confined or trapped? Or do they have what we perceive here for ourselves, an entire existence? They go places, they have friends, and they interact. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that they're living their lives. And that's where Einstein's relativity theories come in, special and general, in that all time exists at the same time. Time is not linear. Time is man-made. And so if you look at it from that perspective, then the Civil War is going on right now as we speak.
Right.
Evolutionary War is going on as we speak. And we've actually captured battle fire. And I think we have an example of that in the PowerPoint.
That was unbelievable. You do. That was an unbelievable EVP. That was Moon River Brewing.
Yeah.
Musket fire and cannon.
Yes.
Did you get that through your white box?
No, that's a straight EVP.
Okay.
And we can date that.
That was unbelievable. In fact, I listened to all of the EVPs, and some of them gave me goosebumps. You listen to some of these shows on TV or some of these YouTube clips, and they'll play these EVPs, and you really have to stretch to be able to hear that what they're claiming that this spirit or entity said. I've got to tell you, and I'm going to tell my audience, the EVPs that Pam and Ashley sent over to me, I mean, there's no stretching. You're hearing these words and you're hearing these sentences. It was quite remarkable. It really was.
We always get evidence. We get tons of evidence. And that's what, really just, it's almost humorous when we watch some of the TV shows and they'll get maybe 2 EVPs during the entire show and they're very excited. We have to pick and choose. We get so many per investigation, like hundreds.
No, we don't know why. And we've always wondered when we do our presentations, we always look at each other and we're like, the first thing I would ask if I was sitting in the audience is, how are you getting all this? Because this doesn't seem realistic. And that's what we would say to ourselves. But no one ever asks, and it surprises us because we're amazed at the amount of evidence that we can gather.
Okay, because some of the shows, and I'm not going to name what the shows are, I'm not even sure if they're on TV anymore, they would do the debrief at the end, and there would be maybe 1 or 2 EVPs, if there were any. And what you're saying is, well, we get a lot more than 1 or 2.
There's stuff we don't cut anymore, I can tell you that. There's things we don't even pull out anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, so much. But what I notice from these shows is they really don't do any research into the site. They take the common ghost story, little Billy died here and he's the little boy that haunts this house. So they go in, they ask Billy to move a ball or make a noise. You're getting exactly what you asked for, nothing.
Right.
So we go in, we know every generation that's ever lived on that site. We know, all about them, their family members, what they did for a living. And maybe that really resonates with them. And maybe they really appreciate the fact that we did all of this homework, that we cared that much about them, that, we have all of this information to base our questions on. And 2, having studied meditation and healing touch and knowing about the human aura and the energy that we all have and how you can raise your consciousness. Have Ashley and I done that? Do they perceive us brighter and more vibratory than someone, say, who's oblivious to these other dimensions? People that just kind of go along in life with blinders on. Maybe they're not as brightly shining. I don't know.
So maybe a higher vibrational state.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, I use the term opens the aperture, widens the spectrum of what it is that you can experience. So those that are at a lower vibrational state, it's more confined, right?
Exactly.
If you're confined, then you're not going to see as much as somebody that's opened up. Very interesting. And you talked about this being really now time, right? It's happening concurrently in parallel because we have linear time here and we think in terms of this was in the past. But what you're experiencing is the possibility that, as you mentioned about quantum physics, is it's all taking place right now.
Exactly. Really,
truly amazing. It really is. I think I digressed a little bit. I derailed you guys about talking about your methodology some more. So is there anything else you want to talk about the methodology? I mean, you guys have the floor.
I guess just the bottom line is that we validate, correct, and reveal history at all the sites that we go. It's not really to prove any kind of haunting. We just really want to be able to learn about the history of these people. And we'll get into the slides and the EVPs, but one great example is this Josiah Bell house in Beaufort, where we discovered this attic had been used as an underground railroad. So that's kind of what these couple of EVPs pertain to.
Okay.
So that's like revealing history. There was some thought amongst some of the townsfolk that there may have been some underground railroad activity in that town, but there was never anything validated. There's quite a bit of Quaker, or had been a Quaker population there during the Civil War, which would support that type of activity. But we were able to actually validate that through our evidence.
And I think that's a huge part of what really helps in our methodology is we have gone through the history of this property. And what we haven't told you is after we investigate, we go back and review our evidence, and we usually go back and review some more history and expand on what we know by what we found, because we usually end up getting some more information and things we didn't count on, and we're like, okay, well, what's this about? So we go back and we research some more. And that was really one of those occasions. We had been told that there was possibly something interesting about that house. The man was a spy. He was a Confederate spy, but when we asked him about being a spy, he said he was not a Yankee and not a Confederate. He was both. And I mean, it just started adding up. And when we got all this information, we went back and we did a lot more review into that area and found out that, yeah, this would have been a perfect Underground Railroad spot by everything and all the historical accounts of the way things worked in that town.
Okay, and again, Ashley, are you having a real-time conversation through your spirit box when you have these discussions?
Yes.
That's amazing. It truly is. Now, are you invited into these locations, or do you select them, or is it a combination of both?
A combination of both, wouldn't you say, Ashley?
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like a ball that started rolling. We kind of started with one location, and then we met somebody, and they said, you should check out this location. Here, call this person. And it just started progressing. And that's how we've ended up. And then a couple of things we've just flat out cold called on and said, hey, this is what we do. This is what we want to do. We carry handheld equipment only. We don't drag a bunch of stuff into your historic location. What do you think? Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay.
So.
And what time do you usually show up when you do this work? Is it in the evening? How does that work?
Sundown. I don't understand, and I don't think Pam believes it either, this whole dead time that you've heard on TV and that you need to be there at 2 or 3 in the morning. You just really need to be there at night for the only reason that you get better photos that way of light anomalies.
Okay.
In the day.
Because we've done quite a bit of investigating during the day and captured evidence. So
I've always wondered that too. It's like, what do they think? The spirits and the entities? Like, well, we only come out at night. So, okay. All right. So that's very interesting too.
I guess we primarily choose the evening because most of these historic sites are open to the public during the day, and
Yeah.
it's just more conducive to investigating after hours.
Now, what kind of video evidence and photos do you have?
Um,
Anything stick out in your mind that was like a wow moment?
we just have we have some really nifty orb video where it's changing direction and things like that, so you know it's not dust and it's not a bug. And recorded the woman singing on video in one of the houses we were in, which was really neat. We have not yet gotten a full-bodied apparition, and that is Pam's goal, and that has not happened.
Although we did get a photo of that sitting man in the American building, but it's not like a real clear full body.
The
And
girl in the graveyard.
yeah, that's a pretty good one in the old burying ground in Beaufort. The little girl that's buried in a rum barrel. Ashley snapped a photo, and we think we captured her.
And that was on a ghost tour, no less. We decided to take a ghost tour for fun.
Oh, okay. Because I had heard that, watching the shows and stuff like that, you guys are probably going to laugh at me, that the camera has to be more of a full spectrum type of camera that, okay, Ashley's laughing at me. Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Pam?
Maybe they do capture better photos, or maybe they're less likely to debunk, through
Yeah.
the full spectrum. But we don't have anything fancy like that. We just shoot, with some infrared and night vision stuff. And, our primary evidence are the EVPs, but, we have a few good photos and a few good video clips.
All right. Well, your EVPs are, like I said, are phenomenal.
One of the things that we have that I wanted to add about our methodology really quick was originally when we started, we would take that methodology and just apply it to the location, and then we would handle that, and then we'd move to the next location. But what we found, we spent the last 2 years really investigating a lot of historic sites that were plantations, and we kind of got into that Civil War, Revolutionary War investigation phase, and that's a lot of what we have so far. But we've decided on a new project, and our new project is pirates and Blackbeard specifically. That's what we were talking about. We've investigated on the water, the very first maritime investigation we ever did, where we took a boat and sat over the wreckage of the Queen Anne's Revenge at Beaufort Inlet and investigated. Got great stuff. We have a whole presentation on that. The next investigation will take place at Ocracoke, and the one after that will take place in Bath, North Carolina, where he supposedly lived. So we really have learned one thing about ourselves. We're really tenacious about getting the information we want. We have a lot of questions that we want answers to.
The next time you guys do a presentation, and if it's local enough, let me know, and I would love to attend. I really would.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm
great.
serious. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually already have some ideas formulated about our third phase of investigations, and we've decided we're going to tackle like the Indian mounds that come through Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee. And many of those have been attributed, or the majority have been attributed to like the early American Indians, like the Mississippian period and the early woodland culture. But we just investigated the lower Chattahoochee River Valley and came away with evidence that indicates it's actually Maya, that it was early Mesoamericans that came into North America and built these mounds. And there is some archaeological support for that, in that Maya pottery have been found at the very earliest levels of these digs.
Okay.
And so that's kind of going to be our phase after the pirate thing. We're going to go even further back into history. These sites date 300 to 600 AD. So we're looking out to the future. We're already planning that out to like next, fall of 2015.
So you might be rewriting the history books.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we've been able to do that with a couple of locations already. So, we discovered the Underground Railroad in Beaufort. We discovered a Union blockade in a Confederate house in North Carolina. And that was really cool. That was probably one of our first biggest discoveries. And it was just phenomenal because, you never know what you're going to get. And we came away with this these EVPs and blockade, keep it open, halt, aim for his heart. And then, what about those Yankees? That's what Pam asked. And they said, oh, wonderful. And then you heard a guy in a real Southern accent go, F you. So we're like, what is going on here? And then, are you a Yankee or are you Confederate? And I don't know. And things like this that came out of the house. And the upfront research yielded that it had been a Confederate household. 2 children in the household had gone to war as Confederate soldiers. One had been killed, one came home wounded. The house was located at the beginning of Hampton Road, which was the road south into Salisbury. And Salisbury was the munitions plant for the Confederacy. And we kind of knew these things, but then when we got that information, we went back and reviewed again and started digging through the history and found out that Stoneman had run his raids through there while Sherman came down the coastal area. And Stoneman's goal was to get to Salisbury and blow that plant and free all of the prisoners, because it was also a really bad prison camp. And basically, you would have blockaded that area because it would have broke the supply lines to Gettysburg for the Confederacy. So we put together through history and the evidence that we got something that no one knew about that area that was just killer.
Yeah, that's amazing. It really is. Absolutely amazing. Now, you said you do your presentations. What types of presentations do you do? Where do you go?
Well, we were invited to the Rhine Research Center. We went down to Duke University in July and presented our methodology PowerPoint. And I think that was the first time they've had actually invited paranormal people in. They're starting to kind of look into this area. We were approached, I guess, about a year ago and worked with the board of directors and got on the schedule for July. So that was the presentation there. We rolled out our quantum physics presentation at DragonCon in Atlanta over Labor Day weekend. We presented a couple of different presentations at Atomicon in Charleston just this past weekend. Yeah, so we present, as often as we can. And we also do fundraising. Like for Beaufort, we've investigated down, I guess, in Beaufort 2 or 3 times. And then we go back to their historic homes tour in June and present our evidence in their old historic courthouse there. And they sell tickets. And we donate all the money to the historic preservation.
And then when you go to the sites, do you spend the entire evening there or just a few hours?
Usually just a couple of hours. We try to, like in Beaufort, we typically, try to get 2 to 3 locations to really make it worth our time being there. And also so we have a nice presentation to offer them during the historic homes tour. So I'd say 2 to 3 hours at each location.
That's
Okay.
about all we need.
And is it just you, Pam, and Ashley doing this work, or do you have others that assist you?
No, it's just us. Just the 2 girls.
The less, the better.
Yeah, because then you get people whispering and eating and chewing gum, and on the review you're not sure what you're hearing, and
Now,
it just doesn't work.
I hear a spirit chewing gum.
when we investigated the Queen Anne's Revenge, because that's on a shoal in the inlet, we had 2 people with us, the boat captain and his wife. So we had them with us, which was really neat. And then we're planning another one that's coming up. We're doing another investigation over the summer, and it's going to require kayaking to the location. So it'll be just Pam and I and kayaks and all of our equipment. So.
All right. So do you do most of your work here on the East Coast, or do you venture out to the West Coast? Where does most of your work take place?
Pretty much, I guess, North Carolina to Florida.
Okay.
Kind of in that range. And we've done some investigating in Kentucky.
Maryland.
Yeah, we did go to Maryland. But pretty much East Coast. But we're not opposed to branching out and going other places. This has just worked well for us because of what Ashley said earlier. We met one connection and then it kind of snowballed into another, and it all seems to be kind of regional.
Okay. And how many investigations do you do annually, approximately?
We really don't pack our calendar full because within each PowerPoint presentation, we have at least 80 hours. Got tons of research up front, then the actual investigation, and then all the review and the back end research. And we want to have, really good quality time to put all of that together. So I would say on average, 3 to 4 really good investigations per year.
Okay.
In the beginning, we were doing a lot more than that, but as we've honed our methodology, that tends to work. And, in between, we're traveling and presenting, and we're doing radio and TV and newspaper. And so, we had to find a balance. So we choose our sites very carefully, and we don't overtax ourselves.
Well, plus you have day jobs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Right.
they
I completely get it. Now, going back to the white box, which you could tell is very fascinating to me, that the EVPs that you guys sent me, are they from the white box, or are they just the EVPs from a recorder?
I think the majority, Ashley, aren't they from the spirit box?
The majority are from the spirit box, and you can tell a difference. Like when you listen to the musket fire and the cannon from Moon River, it's very quiet and crisp, but you'll listen to some and you have like a background static noise. That's what's recorded through the spirit box.
Okay.
It's background white noise. So when your TV's doing its white noise, that's what the spirit box is doing. It's just...
Very interesting, because when you mentioned that earlier, the thought that came to my mind, you remember the movie Poltergeist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
That's the example we always use.
And you remember how the little girl was interacting with the white noise and the static on the television set?
Yeah, just like that.
Yeah. So this tells me that because in the work that I do, there's a lot of predictive programming out there. There's a lot of stuff that gets put out there, and people just think that, oh, the person who made the movie, don't they have just a splendid imagination? Is it that? Or is it that they already know
Right.
that this is the type of technology that can be used in order to have that interaction?
Makes me wonder if someone didn't know that was a part of that movie.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly right. I mean, it's a story I always tell. Well, I'll just digress a little bit here, but a lot of people don't realize that the whole series, Star Trek, with Captain Kirk and Spock, that was actually put together with the involvement of the Rand Corporation. So now you have Rand that's involved in the formulation of Star Trek, and then everybody would watch Star Trek and they would say, isn't it amazing how today we have these cell phones and Captain Kirk was talking into his little phone, And then you have to take a step back and say, well, is it amazing, or did the people who put it together already know how this worked and they were basically going to just roll it out over time to get the public interested and conditioned and so on? So anyway, I digress. Yeah. I apologize. Pam or Ashley, is there anything else? Because I find this extremely interesting. Anything else you want to talk about?
I think we're good.
You think you're good? All right.
Just give us questions about the evidence, and we'll let you know whatever you want to know.
Well, one of the questions I did have, and you mentioned it earlier, was you do not do residential homes or stuff like that, right?
No.
Okay, but I just want to make that clear, because when this goes out on YouTube, it's going to be a lot of people. I want the ladies to come to my house, so you don't do that work. All right, just want to make
no,
sure.
we don't. And I think, Mike, when I first met you, I was involved in a case that involved this little girl. Do you remember that story?
Yes, I do remember the story.
That's why we no longer do the residential case.
Okay.
It's way too intense. That was the last residential case that we took.
Talking about residential, just as you're speaking, Pam, I've had, even in my house here, I've had a couple of situations where there's two specifically. I remember when I first moved in, I was downstairs and I was watching TV. And then I would hear this banging around, this walking around upstairs. And I just moved into the house, maybe I was there a couple of weeks. And at first, you're thinking, what is that? I would turn the TV off, or I would mute it, and it would go away. And I would put it back on, and it would crank up again. So it's almost like, and maybe do you find this in your work? It's almost as if sometimes they toy with you. They know what you're doing, It's like, oh, wait for him to put it on mute, then we'll stop. And I was downstairs, and then it was very obvious. There was a lot of banging around and walking around upstairs. So I had a lot of experiences with this, because as I mentioned earlier, when we first got started with the discussion when I was a kid, I'm not a novice. Growing up, I had lots of experiences with paranormal. So I just came upstairs and I just checked to make sure it wasn't, whatever. And then finally I just said, look, you guys, you need to knock it off, because I'm not going to be doing this. I know you think it's funny that I'm downstairs watching TV and every time I go to watch it, you're going to bang around. And it was interesting. It was after that, it just completely stopped. So I don't know if you have those types of experiences. Do you have moments where you feel like they are playing around or toying with you and seeing what kind of reaction they can get from you?
I do. I think they do at our homes. And it's not even like I've heard people talk about after we investigated, something followed me home. It's not even that anymore. I mean, stuff just happens. And I don't know. We just kind of roll with it. And my husband and I have a running joke about it when stuff goes on. We're like, well, we wish they would put some sheetrock up. If you want to do something, we got plenty of projects.
Do something productive.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say to both of you, Pam and Ashley, ladies, that this has been really a lot of fun. And anytime you want to come back, even if you want to come back for a short segment, just to talk about maybe a particular site that you went to and your evidence and so on, you're more than welcome. Because I know the audience is going to find this extremely interesting.
Well, thanks for having us, Mike.
Let's keep in touch, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, ladies. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
And before we conclude the show with Pam and Ashley, I would like for the audience to take a listen to a sampling of some of the EVPs the ladies have recorded. For each EVP, there will be two versions. The first will be the original untouched recording I received from Pam and Ashley, and the second version will be the same recording with the static minimized. I did this by running the audio through my sound program and extracting as much of the noise as I could. The first two clips are sourced from the Wampee Plantation investigation, dated 1696. And in clip number 1, Ashley asks the spirit for their name, and they respond with John.
My name's Ashley. What's your name?
John.
And now the same clip with the noise reduced.
My name's Ashley. What's your name?
John.
And here's the second clip from the Wampee Plantation investigation. And here Pam is asking the spirit if they raise cotton, and the response is, yes, ma'am.
You raise cotton?
And here's that same clip with the noise removed.
You raise cotton?
The next three clips are from the Hanover House investigation, dated 1715. In the first clip, Pam asks about Christmas dinner and what kind of cake do the spirits have, and they respond with apple strudel.
What's for Christmas dinner? What kind of cake do you have?
And here's the same clip with the noise removed.
What's for Christmas dinner? What kind of cake do you have?
This next EVP from Hanover House, we hear step 'em up, salute, and halt. And now the same clip with the noise removed. In his third clip from Hanover House, Pam asks who's in the room, and the spirits respond with Murdoch, Lenny, Baker, McNichols, and Neil.
Who's in the room? Give us a name.
And here's the same clip with the noise removed.
Who's in the room? Give us a name.
The next EVP is from the Angel Hetzel House investigation dated 1827. Pam asks the spirits if their father paid for the house, and the spirit responds by saying he earned it.
Charity, did your father pay for this house?
And now the same clip with the noise removed.
Charity, did your father pay for this house?
Now this last EVP is one of the most extraordinary I have ever heard. Pam and Ashley were investigating Moon River Brewing, dated 1733, and recorded musket and cannon fire. Take a listen to this one. And now the very same clip with the noise removed. And that concludes my interview with Pam Nance and Ashley Field, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Pam and Ashley's website, Spirit Hunters of the South, can be found at spirithunter.us. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog, The Sage of Quay. Also, if you get a moment, please take a listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia, by heading over to laboroflovemusic.com. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.